The Accidental Entrepreneur is brought to you with the help of our sponsor, Aweber, the world's leading small business email marketing and automation service provider. Since 1998, Aweber has helped more than 1 million small businesses and entrepreneurs through its suite of web-based email marketing, automation tools, and education. Aweber, the best option when it comes to marketing your business. The podcast is also brought to you by the Alternative Board. Since 1989, the Alternative Board, or TAB, has been one of the leading peer advisory and business coaching organizations for independent business owners and CEOs across the world. By facilitating peer advisory boards, private one-on-one coaching, and strategic planning services, TAB helps business owners improve their businesses in ways that change their lives. And be sure to connect with our affiliate sponsor, GSM Growth Agency. They're boosting e-commerce businesses to 6 and 7 figures in revenue and cover everything from ads and social media influencers to making your website better. GSM Growth Agency focuses on taking businesses from startup success to bigger success, going above and beyond to make sure growth sticks around. They're all about cool ideas, lasting partnerships, and making your mark in the e-commerce world. And be sure to support the podcast by ordering some logo merchandise from our online store. Listen to all of our sponsors' commercials later in this episode and follow their links in the show notes to learn more about their products and services. All right, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Beinhacker, another great guest. I'm going to talk to Nick in a minute. If you are listening on your favorite directory, leave us a 5-star review whenever you can. If you're watching us on YouTube, like the channel, subscribe so you can keep in touch and hear about all the great guests we're bringing on. Starting off 2025 with a great interview. Let's get on with the show.
The information provided in these episodes is for entertainment purposes only. It is not a guarantee of success or to be construed as advice of any kind. You should always seek advice from local licensed professionals before making any decisions.
The dictionary defines an entrepreneur as a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative and risk. People often start a business without much choice, perhaps due to a job loss or just being dissatisfied at work, and they come up with an idea they just know can be successful. They become entrepreneurs by accident. That is to say, their success or failure happens by accident, not with intention. My name is Mitch Beinhacker. I'm a corporate attorney and a business advisor. You're listening to The Accidental Entrepreneur, my podcast about how to achieve success on purpose, not by accident. Join me along with our monthly guests, where we share our knowledge and help you get a hold of your business. And now on to today's episode. All right, Nick. So as I mentioned, this is, we release 90 to 120 days out, but this is the first interview of 2025. It's January 3rd. So Happy New Year. And thanks for coming on the show.
Happy New Year to you as well, and awesome to be the inaugural interview of 2025.
Now, Nick, where are you located? I didn't even ask you that.
In Philadelphia.
You're an Eagle. Are you an Eagles fan?
I'm not. I'm not a big football fan, unfortunately. I grew up in Canada, so more a hocky guy. More
there
so
you
than
go.
anything else.
Yeah, I can hear your accent. Yeah, so the Eagles stole Saquon Barkley from us. Not really, but and now he's killing us, and we're playing him this weekend. So I'm glad you're not a football fan. Okay. All right, so why don't we do this? Why don't we talk, because off mic, I know you've done different businesses, and people who are listening are going to see that they don't seemingly related, but you can maybe tie those in. But I know you were in trucking and you were in shoes. I don't know if it's men's shoes, kids' shoes, women's shoes, whatever. I know a little bit about the shoe business, and now you're in software. So maybe we go back to your origin story, so to speak.
Sure. So my professional background really starts with an education, math, and physics. So I was trained as like a hardcore abstract scientist, right? Have not really used any of that till very, very recently. Right. Then I spent a bunch of time on Wall Street as a professional investor doing big private equity deals buying billion-dollar companies, turning them around. So a big place like Bain Capital had an extremely good professional education there. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I stumbled into the career I'm in now, which I would call I'm a professional CEO. Okay. So either private equity firms, founders, entrepreneurs, they hire me when their companies are ready for that next stage of success. And that could be either a turnaround situation or conversely, a company that's doing well but wants to take it to the next level.
Right. And a lot of startups and founders, you and I both know, it's a different skill set as a CEO at a different level. I mean, a lot of these people just can't make the jump. And the problem is that they don't have guys like you, or they're not involved with private equity, and they struggle.
Exactly, right. They bring in, guys like me bring in, guys or gals like me, I should say, bring in a specific skill set, which is I know how to take an organization that has a great idea, a great product, and make the organization scalable, which means you have to have, good governance. You have to have HR
Right.
policies. You have to stop relying on superstars, right? A lot of startups are really or young organizations are dependent
Yeah.
on one or two just amazing employees, but
Right.
that doesn't scale. When you have an organization of 1,000 people,
Yeah.
not everyone is going to be a 10x or a rock star. How do you make that organization sustainable and scalable without relying just on the one or two people, for example?
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, Nick, and I don't want to gloss it over at all. I think, and I've had other people on the show about this too, about scaling, right? It's a big topic. We talk about it. You can't just scale your organization like however you're running it. It has to be prepared to do it. You can really fail if you scale too quickly and can't handle, and it happens like everybody says, oh, I'll worry about that if it happens when I get all this business. But if you don't have the governance, if you don't have the structure in place, if you don't have the systems in place, I know guys that help with scaling, and they won't touch a company if they don't have the systems, if they're not ready to scale. And I think that a lot of small business owners don't realize that is a different, preparation. It's not just about growing your business. Scaling and growing your business are not the same thing. Would you agree?
Yeah. Growing is just, look, you're throwing money at it and you're growing revenues, hopefully in a positive ROI.
Right.
Scaling it in a way that is doing that sustainably, right?
Yeah.
So like as a silly example, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, Ideascale will continue and succeed. And that's really good because I've made myself not obsolescent, but not essential. And that's really important for a
company's not
scalable organization.
so dependent on you. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a huge problem, right? Do you ever see an organization where they have, like, I don't know, the guy started the company and he had an assistant and she kind of moved up with the company, just the two of them, and it grew. And now she's like running everything. Like if she goes away for a month, the whole company shuts down. So when I've done some consulting, I've told people, listen, that's what you want to do. Pay her, send her away for a month, tell her, don't call the office. We're going to see how this goes. Assuming that it's not going to really hurt the business, but and start letting people figure things out, because sometimes businesses become much too reliant on, one or two people, and you can't scale those businesses.
And again, it's awesome to have those key employees, but that fundamentally doesn't work when you're, trying to build 100-person organization or 1,000 or 10,000-person organization, right?
Yeah, not at all. And that doesn't make the person obsolete, but maybe they should be the president and not doing everything in the company.
Yes, and you need backups. It's more than it's the opposite of obsolescence. They're important, but you have backup systems and backup systems, or backup people, so that God forbid if they get sick, they leave to go to another organization, or they could be great still, but the world's needs change, right? If like your extraordinary person is great at email marketing and tomorrow the world switches to ChatGPT based marketing, you need to be able to adapt to that change dynamically and scale.
All right, so let's talk about your background. I know you graduated Harvard, did you?
Yeah, I did my undergraduate at Dartmouth and then my MBA at Harvard Business School.
Oh, good. I'm a Cornell guy, so we're all Ivy League. So let's talk about, because I think after you came out, then you worked for Bain, then is that how you got into these different businesses? They were through private equity groups, okay, so let's talk about the trucking business first.
Sure. So I'd spent about 10 years on Wall Street doing, as a private equity investor or as a hedge fund investor in public companies. And somewhere around post-COVID, I kind of got a random call, to be honest, right? The show is called Accidental Entrepreneur. I got a random call that said, hey, Nick, do you want to co-run a $100 million revenue trucking business? I'm like 27, 28 at the time, and that's a pretty unique and extraordinary opportunity.
Now, who's the guy calling you? You said random call.
It was a private equity firm that had heard that I'd done some other good work as a professional investor. Okay. And they said, hey, we have somebody who knows a lot about trucking running the business, but we also want someone who knows a lot about how do you run a business effectively and make money doing it. And that's obviously a skill you get really good at if you're good at being an investor. Yeah. And so from my perspective, it's an opportunity to apply my skills. It's an opportunity to go run a company, a sizable company, by the way. Right. And it's obviously a tremendous professional opportunity for me as well.
Okay. So this was the private equity group that owned the trucking company. They're looking to buy the trucking company. Got it. So they needed a guy like you because the owner wasn't capable of doing it.
No, the owner, there was already a CEO in place and he knew everything about trucking. He was really good at trucking, but I brought in skills like how do you run a finance department? How do you run a sales department? How do you actually make money? How do you make positive ROI-based decisions? Which is, again, a very different skill set. So together, he and I, we were like complementary, right? I knew very little about trucking when I showed up day one. but I brought other skill sets to the table.
So,
and so we worked as a joint, as a team to really advance the success of this company.
Okay, so what was the condition of things when you arrived?
Sure. So there was no finance system. HR. There was no HR governance system. The sales team was basically three guys and the sales process was calling your people that you'd known for 20 or 30 years. So there was no outbound sales process. There was no systematic pricing. Trucking is very complicated to price because you have to price by route, by destination, by day of week, and by length of time in advance that you're booking. So think of it almost like, ordering Uber where the price changes every minute.
Yeah.
Based on a variety of conditions, whether it's raining or not. And so pricing, there wasn't a formal pricing setup. Everyone had to price everything manually. Right.
So the
and
guy
so
holding the job, like the salesperson, was pricing these things?
The salesperson would try and do their best guess, tell the clients, but they couldn't actually, do the pricing themselves. It had to go to a finance department. Then the finance guy, there was a one-person team, and he manually had to price out like 1,000 rows in Excel. So he might take, a week to do it, by which side the customer's like, hey, are we doing business or not?
Yeah, right. If I call a moving
company. And these are multi-million-dollar contracts.
Yeah, right. They're huge, right? So, but they want to make decisions.
Yeah, exactly. So you needed a much more scalable process. Not only how do you get leads in the door, it can't just be people talking or calling up people that they've known for 20 or 30 years. That's not a scalable business. You need to have an outbound sales process to reach new customers that you've never met before, encountered. And then once you get those customers are starting to talk to you, you have to be able to react to them much more quickly. You can't take a week to give them a price or quote back. They give you the information you need. You give them a quote back tomorrow, and you're off to the races and signing that $1 million contract today rather than a month from now or 3 months from now.
And it doesn't even it calls into question the quality of the service, the capability of the company. If they can turn a quote around for
then on the labor side, for example, trucking is a very labor heavy business. You have our labor planning was crazy in the warehouses, right? There were people running up like 40 or 50 hours of overtime, even though there wasn't work to do because there's no governance on, hey, who's managing that a person gets overtime or not? That's really important in a business where there's a lot of hourly labor costs.
Yeah. So now, did you guys own the fleet? Did you own the trucks and the drivers?
So we had both an internal fleet of trucks and vehicles and trailers that we owned, as well as that we brokered out or subcontracted out. Subcontracted for, I should say. Yeah.
So I had a guy on my show probably a couple of years ago, and he was a young guy. He'd raised money through Republic, one of the crowdsourcing websites. Raised like $1 million. He had this thing, I think it was called fleet.com, or anyway, what it was a marketplace to connect independent guys with trucks with companies that didn't have their own fleet or needed supplemental trucks for shipping, because apparently he told me it's just a mess of an industry. Like there's nothing that's
there's basically like 3 Craigslist, they're called load boards, right? Where someone says, I have a truck and then I have a load that I want to put on a truck. And it's like a dating service. You basically contact each other.
Yeah.
And there's like 3 or 4 of these, but candidly, the technology behind these load boards, they work. These are multi-million, probably multi-billion-dollar businesses where billions of dollars of freight goes through these load boards. They're basically Craigslist. But the technology on them looks like they're from like the 1990s, right? Because trucking, unfortunately, on average, is not a very, tech-forward industry.
No.
Today, yet. It is advancing, by the way. There have been major advancements over the last 5 or 6 years as technology firms have gone in and realized there's an opportunity to, to modernize the technology here and make a huge improvement in the industry.
I mean, I would think the whole thing's logistics, right? So to be able to track a vehicle, know where it is, get diagnostics from a vehicle, know if there's a problem immediately, because you got to get another truck on the road or a repair crew or whatever, I think it should be all technology, it sounds like.
So the funny thing is some areas they've gotten really good at. There's been GPSs on trucks for a long time to figure out, because asset theft, people stealing trucks or trailers was a big problem 10 or 20 years ago. Now that's less of a problem.
Okay.
However, there's other areas where it's a major problem. So a lot of trucking still, when you drop your load off at a destination, there's a paper document you need to get signed.
Like a lading.
Then the trucker drives over to the local truck stop, scans it and then faxes it to their finance department. And the finance department tries to read the scribble, because you know how terrible fax machines graphics are. or you may not, right? So your
Yeah, I don't
audience
know
may
if
not, but like fax
anymore.
machines were terrible. It's not like
Right.
a beautiful, HD camera. So there's other areas of trucking that are incredibly, incredibly backwards and look like they're from the 1980s. But unfortunately, like you don't have a lot of tech people running around the tech industry historically. And number two, unfortunately, trucking is a very low margin industry.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of profits. Even the people who are very forward thinking, there's not a lot of money to say, hey, I'm going to go take all the profits I have and invest it into better technology, because there's not a lot of profits in the first place.
Right. So you're not like, they're not going to invest and get everyone a tablet and they can do it all electronically and press a button and it goes wirelessly.
It's a good long-term investment, but to make those good long-term investments, you need a pile of money today. And most trucking companies are not sitting on a pile of money today. Now, there are exceptions, right? There's a couple multi-billion-dollar publicly listed companies like Old Dominion or Saia that have invested extraordinary amounts of money into technology.
Right.
But that's because they have billions of dollars of profits to do it.
Right.
But 95% of the trucking and logistics companies in the United States are basically, sub 100 trucks.
Right.
Which means they're making $1 million a year. So do they have $1 million to invest in software and another $3 million to pay for a CTO or technology team that can go implement it?
Right. Now, how big was the company? Your company must have been bigger than that, or a private.
So we were about $100 million in revenue, okay. 4 physically owned warehouse locations, and then probably 1,000 or so end points that we were delivering to around the country, primarily large retail distribution centers.
So on $100 million, what's the profit margin on that roughly?
I can't disclose that because it's private information for a private equity firm.
Oh, got it. Okay.
But we can say sub 10% is kind of normal in the industry. That's
the answer I was looking for. Okay. Yeah. So because I've dealt with businesses $80, $100 million, but they're only making like $1.5, $2 million in profit because they're run very poorly. 1 or 2 changes, they could double their profit immediately.
Yeah. At the trucking company, actually, we were, during my first 12 months there, I think we doubled the EBITDA margin, which was a wonderful area. Still, again, it was not software margins or software profitability, but it was nice to double the profits while I was there.
It just because things are being run better, right? More efficiency. Mm-hmm. You even said all the overtime, everything like that. People weren't doing it.
We improved our, the specific things that I was involved in that I'm pretty proud of is, number one, we got much better at our warehousing pricing. Our warehousing pricing was 15 years out of date. There were customers that were paying 1980s prices. Number two, obviously the labor thing that I mentioned, getting labor in line and making sure there was some governance there. And number three, there were just random crazy costs in the business for stuff somebody had signed up for, 10 years ago and forgot to cancel, or there were better versions of the stuff out there. So, one example that I love is Salesforce is a big CRM software. It costs you $250,000 a year. However, there's modern software, whether you call it HubSpot or Acorn or whatever, that does the same thing, and they cost $10,000 a year.
Right.
So you should and it's better software in my opinion. So why pay 25 times as much?
Yeah, right. Sure. Now, when you were brought in, was it there's an exit strategy? I mean, the private equity group wanted to eventually sell the business, and that was one of the reasons why you were brought in, or that wasn't?
This was very early in the deal, right? I think the private equity firm had just bought this company 6 months before I joined, or 6 months or a year before I joined. The exit strategy was a typical private equity strategy where about 5 or 10 years later, the private equity firm would sell the company.
Yeah.
But that wasn't a discussion we were having at that time because we were just starting the journey together.
Got it. So how long did you stay with the company?
About a year and a half.
Oh, that was it. It was scheduled to be that way. It's going to be
I got a really cool opportunity to go join this to go join the shoe company. So I left to go join this shoe company.
Got it. So when you exited that business, the trucking company, what happened to the trucking company later on?
So they're still doing well. They're still doing well and continuing on. I made the impact that I wanted to there. Again, I doubled the margins while I was there and added a little bit of growth too. But then it was again, when a cool opportunity came along for me, I obviously took it.
All right. So let's talk about shoes, because I have a client of mine who used to be in the shoe business. I think it was mostly children's shoes years ago. We're talking 20 years ago or whatever, but he'd be traveling all over the world and going to different parts, South America and Italy and whatever to source these shoes and get them made. And it was a crazy business. So what attracted you to the shoe business, which has nothing to do with trucking, by the way, but it doesn't really matter. I guess you're a systems guy. So.
Sure. So I think it was 2 or 3 things. First, I think the 2 co-founders of that business were just really interesting people. This was their second business that they started. The first one they'd sold successfully, which was a tutoring business, and they were both passionate about shoes. This was high-end men's urban shoes. So think Nikes and Yeezys, shoes that are $200 to $1,000 a pop, right?
Okay.
Fancy sneakers.
Right.
So number one, they were really interesting, good people that I felt I'd learn a lot from. They've done, the entrepreneurial journey before, and they had passion and skills. Number two is that this was this created a lot of professional upside for me. This was a company that was just starting out. It had like 1 million or 2 million of revenue. It had just been founded like 18 months ago. So a lot of upside for me as I thought about the journey there. Number three is I had done some work when I was in business school on e-commerce, and the unit economics of e-commerce, when managed really well, are really effective. So I liked the idea that I was trying to shift more towards technology in my career, but an e-commerce seemed like a good entry point into that from a kind of the businesses can be run extraordinarily well if people understand how to run them.
So this was a scratch manufacturing e-commerce business, meaning, or did
They
buy
weren't
an existing
manufacturing.
business?
They were a rental business. So they did realize that there were a whole bunch of people that wanted, I don't know how much you know about the high-end sneaker business, but
I mean,
it's
I
basically
know.
collector's items. People buy
Yes,
these $300
exactly.
sneakers. They leave them in like bookcases or showcases, and
Right.
they may wear them once a year
Yeah, my
to
son
show
does.
off at a party or
Of
social
course.
event.
Yeah.
And that's really, so you have a lot of people, middle-class people who have like $5,000 or $10,000 of shoes. And
Yeah.
this is,
Ridiculous.
it's like 80% men. So this is a relatively recent phenomenon where middle class men, are hanging out to $5,000 or $10,000 of shoes in shoe cases, bookcases in their bedrooms or their
I know
homes.
guys that have businesses just to source the shoes, to get
Yeah,
them ahead of time, then resell them.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
there's three submarkets, right? There's people who are basically brokers, where they're buying and reselling the
Yeah.
shoes and making a
Mhm.
profit. Then there's ones who are collectors, where they're buying them and holding on to them as investments. And there's investment marketplaces called like StockX, where
Right.
these shoes trade
Shoes and
just like
watches.
stocks.
Right.
Um,
Crazy.
so you buy a shoe, and usually you're not flipping it like 6 months later. You're holding on for 5 or 10 years, the way you would with a fine piece of art or
Right.
wine.
Yeah.
And then the third group are people who actually want to wear these items, and often it's like that was the group that we were trying to help, right? Because for them, you don't want to buy a $300 pair of shoes that you're going to wear once. That's a
Right.
terrible investment. And even if you can afford it, you also physically in your house, you don't want to have 50 pairs of shoes. Most people don't have like large
Yeah.
homes where they can have 50 pairs of shoes. Like one of our board members had like 150 pairs of shoes, but he owned a mansion in the Bay Area. So
Yeah.
he has
Like a
like
closet.
he has like a closet filled with shoes,
Right.
right? But the average American, myself included, doesn't have that level of space.
Yeah. No way.
And so we were trying to solve the problem like, hey, why pay for an asset or a piece of clothing that you're only going to use once? Rent it instead. And rent it like a library card. So you're paying us for basically you're paying us for a library card. Check out a pair of shoes or 2 pairs of shoes or 3, depending on your subscription. Return them. We'll clean them again and make them look like brand new, and rent them out to the next person, whoever wants to check them out as part of this library subscription.
So this is a online used rental marketplace.
Correct. A rental library, I would call it, rather than a marketplace, because we generate almost no revenues through sales.
There was no sales, but was it your inventory?
Yes, it was our inventory. So we bought the inventory. We were the library that bought all these shoes, and we spent a lot of time trying to figure out which models and shoes are worth having for us.
Right.
That was a huge part of the business model, like very fancy analytics on figuring out what's the inventory that we can buy at an attractive enough price and yet make enough money on the renting it out to others. And then our revenue was obviously customers paying us for the rental subscription to this library card.
All right. So it sounds to me like you were attracted to the business more because of these guys and you're impressed with them. But what did you think? I mean, I know subscription-based businesses are good models, right? When it comes to building value and maybe an exit strategy or whatever, but it doesn't sound like a very viable business. So obviously you didn't agree with that. You thought it was a viable business. So yeah, like what made you attracted to used shoes? I mean, they weren't used at the beginning, right? After the first person rented them, then they were used.
Sure. So, by the way, I should mention that the business did fail ultimately. So I was wrong, and this was an attractive business.
Right. That's good to admit that.
Yeah, but my ingoing assumption was that there were 2 areas for real advantage here versus. So, firstly, I agree, subscription businesses can be incredibly valuable, but that's like obvious and table stakes.
Right.
The insight I thought I had, and again, I ended up being wrong, was 2 things. Number one is that a lot of these rental businesses are run by people who are not sophisticated at analytics and figuring out what to buy. a big part of retail, like if you're working in Macy's, some of the smartest people at Macy's are the ones who are figuring out which shoes or which shirts to buy. There's an incredible amount of analytics that goes into that at Macy's or Walmart
because you're
or
buying
Amazon.
for the next season. You're like
Exactly.
predicting what's
So
going to be
there's a ton
popular.
of math that goes into that, ton of analytics, ton of style knowledge. And the average person running a small e-commerce website, they're focused mostly on the marketing website and the advertising. They don't know about inventory management, and that's a core part of any retail business. The inventory managers are what they call the buyers in the retail business. And I had a big advantage there because I'm a theoretical math guy, really good with data analytics. When I was working in private equity and hedge funds, I spent a bunch of time investing in these retail businesses. So I thought I had a competitive advantage versus other and I did, by the way, that part of the thesis held true. Like we got really good at the analytics and figuring out arbitrages. The second part was that the unit economics of the rental market could be very good, right? With the price that you're buying an asset versus the price that you're renting out at could be very good. No different than like if you're doing real estate where you're thinking about what price do I buy a house at that I can then turn into a rental property. Right. This part of my thesis ended up being incorrect because the price that the people were willing to pay for rent on average for the library subscription did not really match up to the full operating costs of the business.
Got it. And you'd only get so many turns out of the shoes, right? And then
well, that wasn't the issue. It was the turns of the shoes were actually pretty good, right? Like we weren't running out of space there, right? But you basically end up paying, I forget the exact math, but like when the shoes come back, you have to clean them. And so you have a crew of on site cleaning the shoes, and which costs. And they're doing a really good job. Like when the shoes came out the other end,
because you want to maintain your inventory, right? I don't want to rent a pair of shoes from you that's some high-end shoes that comes and they got marks on them. And
these were guys like literally going at it with toothbrushes, like artisans, right? This is not like Nick scrubbing it off with a towel. It is artisanal cleaning.
Yeah, okay.
Right. One of our guys was taken away, I think, by Louis Vuitton to go do like their cleaning. So this is high-end cleaning. Yeah. But it was really expensive to do the cleaning, number one. And number two is that the people who were willing to pay for the subscription, there were two problems. Number one, they weren't willing to pay as much as we needed for it to be a good business. Right. And number two, there weren't that many of them because it turns like, unfortunately, most people, this is a bad insight or something on reflection I learned. There are people who have enough money that they will make economically bad decisions where they're like, so a bunch of rich people that we thought would be customers because they're like, this is a good decision.
They don't care.
They'd rather just buy it, even though they know it's a bad decision, right? It's
even if they didn't have the room, they don't care. They got a closet and they're all piled.
Yeah, whereas like in my personal life, I'm like the best type of customer for this type of business because if it makes economic sense to buy versus rent, I'll do whatever. I'll do the math in my head or on a spreadsheet, and I'll do exactly what is economically optimal, right? Yeah. So I buy in bulk when it makes sense, or conversely, when there's some a single item on discount, I'll buy that. Right. But it turns out the average operating income person in the United States, or maybe not the average, but the median, certainly is not going through that math in their head, and they're going through the math and saying, "Screw it, I'll still make the."
They're making emotional decisions.
I've got the money.
Right. Exactly. So so it becomes a very small marketplace in terms of operating. Interesting. So things just don't work out like you think they're going to work out. I was confused about that. All right. So we'll take a break and go to commercial, but what's the one or two things that you would say you learned from that experience? I always think that like when we fail, we learn like 10 times more than when we succeed, which is the irony of life, right? You have to fail to learn more. But what would you think you learned from seeing that business fail, being involved in the process?
I think two things. Number one, spend more time understanding the potential marketplace of businesses that I want to work in. I think I have underappreciated that throughout my career. More appreciating of it now, more appreciative of it now. And number two is get a lot more analytical on the unit economics of a business.
Meaning?
So the unit economic of a business is how much money does it make per transaction. So let's use a very simple example for a burger shop. To make a burger shop, you need three inputs. You need the materials for the food. You need some labor to put the food together in a burger, and then you basically have the price. So those three numbers, right? What price can you sell the burger at? What's the cost of materials? And number three, what's the cost of labor? Technically, you have to account for electricity and the renting the burger shop, but those three big things that matter. And if A minus B minus C doesn't equal a big positive number, that's a bad business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you have your cost of goods sold, you basically have your operating costs. You add those two together, you subtract it from the price that let's say the market, that's the most the market can bear. I always tell people the good ideas don't mean they're good businesses. Like there might not be any profit in it. So,
Mhm.
all right, let's take a commercial and then we'll come back and talk about idea scale and what you're doing now.
Perfect.
All right. Here's a word from our sponsors. Looking to market and grow your business? Or perhaps you're just getting started and want to hit the ground running? AWeber is the best choice for online email marketing and automation of your business. From maintaining a subscriber list to drip campaigns and landing pages, AWeber gives you tools and integrations that make marketing easy and fun. As our partner and sponsor, we use all their tools to promote the podcast and market our law firm. AWeber, the best alternative for online marketing. For over 30 years, the Alternative Board, or TAB, has built a thriving community of forward-thinking CEOs and business owners who want to radically improve their companies. Through unique combinations of one-on-one business coaching, participation in monthly TAB board meetings with other non-competing owners, a suite of strategic tools, and customized strategic planning workshops, TAB membership can deliver greater strength to your business and a better work-life balance for you and your family. All packaged in a streamlined and affordable service that the people at TAB invite you to try risk-free. Are you struggling with managing advertising due to a lack of time or expertise? Perhaps you're facing challenges in scaling ads for your store. Are you feeling lost when strategies have no success? GSM Growth Agency is your reliable partner in overcoming these business challenges. Feel the impact of collaborating with a team dedicated not only to short-term goals, but also to building long-term partnerships and achieving sustained success. Embark on an exciting journey to redefine the possibilities of e-commerce and create a legacy of unparalleled excellence. Take decisive action now. Follow their link in the show notes to receive a complimentary audit of your Shopify store conducted by a GSM expert. Propel your e-commerce game to new heights with GSM Growth Agency. Follow the link in the show notes to learn more about all of our sponsors. And now back to our show. All right, Nick. So I think it's all coming together, right? Because you're really you're an analytics guy, a systems guy. So now it makes sense that you ended up where you are, right? Because that's really what your system does. It helps people scale and run their businesses better. So tell me about the whole, how that idea came about and how it developed and how you developed the company. Because I know you work with big companies now. We're going to talk about little companies. Now you can help them, but does that make sense?
So Ideascale, I want to be clear. I'm not the founder. I was brought in as an external CEO. We've been in business now for about 15 years,
Okay.
and we are the largest innovation software company on the planet. Our customers are huge organizations like Comcast, Transportation Safety Authority, Post Office, Pfizer, ING Bank, like big institutions around the world, both in the United States and overseas. And what our software does is it helps them innovate better. Specifically, it helps them do three things. Number one, capture cool ideas.
Okay.
Number two, figure out which ideas are good versus bad, because not all cool ideas are good. And number three, turn those ideas into reality.
Okay.
So like an example would be like, I'll use an example of how we use our own software in-house. So we're a software company. We are always thinking about what features should we build or not. And everyone's got ideas. So they they use our software, drop in their ideas for, hey, you should build this feature, you should kill this feature, change this color, whatever it is. Other people around the company or around the world, actually, you don't even have to be an employee of Ideascale, can vote on, hey, I like this idea, so let's upvote it. I hate that idea, let's downvote it. And then that helps us figure out which ideas are good. And then the best features based on crowdsourcing the input of everyone around the company and everyone around the world helps us figure out which features we should develop and which are most impactful for our company or software. Not just features, by the way. We actually, fun one was we actually used it to select our new company mascot about 6 months ago.
So is it a platform? I haven't seen the software, but is it a platform for managing any systems, or is it really just kind of an input, like a Teams voting type of?
It's more of it's a social network for ideas. So in TikTok, you put in your funny cat dance videos. In Ideascale, you put in your funny, or you put in your not funny, but you put in your impactful ideas.
Okay, so you mentioned the post office. You mean the United States Post Office?
Yes, sir.
which I'll say this publicly, I think is a terribly run organization. They're just a mess. I mean, it comes to, I don't even know how they stay in business. If they weren't funded by the government, constantly giving them money, they would have been out of business a long time ago. How does an organization, is company the right word? How does an organization like the United States Post Office use your software? Like, I can't, innovation and the U.S. Post Office aren't two words I put together.
So that's why they use our software, right? So,
okay.
So look, a lot of the government agencies that we, often complain about as citizens or people who use these government services, the people who run those organizations, they're not stupid. They know they have backwards organizations, but public sector organizations in particular, they're often under constraints, right? Yeah. Every time they make a change, they have to go through a public notification period, or they have large amounts of union and bureaucracies to deal with.
Not a lot of entrepreneurship goes on.
So I want to be clear, a lot of government organizations know they are backwards and not as innovative as they need to be. And they're trying to get better, okay?
Yeah.
But they struggle against challenges that a lot of private sector organizations don't.
They're strong-armed in some regard.
Exactly, they're strong-armed. Or I use the term constrained, but strong-armed.
Constrained is a good, I mean, look, you and I both know, right? You want to do anything with the government, the whole world's got to know about it. You got to go through a whole process.
Exactly, right? Like the post office, so let's use an example. I can't use an example from the post office because I don't actually see their data, but I'll use an example from one of the other federal government agencies that use us, that's responsible for increasing employment in the United States. And one of the problems they were trying to solve was, how do we increase the employment of people with disabilities? Okay. That's a really difficult problem to solve because you have people who have disabilities, so they may not be able to do certain things that a fully able person could, but you want to encourage employers to employ them. But from the employer's perspective, hey, how can I employ somebody who may not be able to use a computer due to visual difficulties?
Right.
And so that's a difficult problem to solve. And from a societal perspective, we want to make those people gainfully employed so they contribute to society and they feel more fulfilled as human beings.
Yes.
That's a difficult problem. If I asked you how to solve it, you may not know how to solve it. So what this big federal agency did was they said, let us go ask every small business in the world, like, how can we help you? What programs can we create? What subsidies or what training programs, what changes and regulations can we make to make it easier for you as a small business to employ people with disabilities? And so they solicited ideas from pretty much anyone in the world. It was an open public campaign, so it wasn't secret.
Okay.
And then small business employers from around the world suggest these, you can do this program, this subsidy, this training program, and other small business owners around the world voted on those. And so the best ideas of those actually, I think 2 or 3 of them actually got implemented after they went through the entire government bureaucracy. Again, change in government is often slower due to the constraints, but government is innovating.
Okay, so they're like crowdsourcing the ideas, basically, right?
Crowdsourcing not only the ideas, but the evaluation of the ideas, which is important, right? Not only do you get a bunch of ideas, but you also it's not Nick thinking this is a great idea in the isolation of his office, but rather Nick getting input from, potentially thousands or millions of people.
Right. So is that what Ideascale is? It's a software platform that allows companies like this government agency to reach out. So how is it connecting with me as a business owner? I don't subscribe to their.
Sure. So they will. So for example, they will create a campaign on Ideascale, right? The same way that you would create a TikTok, username.
Yeah.
And then you can invite people, right? So they can put posters up, they can invite people, they can send you an email and say, hey, Mitch, would you like to participate in our campaign? And you can go participate in their campaign on this topic, either by submitting an idea, by voting an idea, or just by viewing the ideas, right? That's important input too, because even if you didn't vote on an idea, if this organization knows that, hey, 80% of our users are looking at this idea, there might be something there, even if no one's actively saying. Maybe it's just a controversial idea that people want to, look at, but not say anything about.
Right. That's interesting.
So, and by the way, it's important to note that sometimes these what we call campaigns can be public, or sometimes they can be private. So at Ideascale, for example, I have some public campaigns that you can go to ideas.ideascale.com right now, and you can see all the stuff we're talking about there. But there's other, secret stuff for my, a secret feature that we're launching that I don't want to make available to the public. Right. I want to have some internal debate upon it. Or it can be even super secret where it's only like 5 people in the company who have access, or 50 people, or 500 people.
We're talking trade secrets, or we're talking.
Yeah, like you may have one of our big finance clients, they have a campaign that is intended just for their finance team within a big bank, right? The bank is 100,000 people, but they only want 300 of these people to see it because it may involve sensitive financial data or sensitive intellectual property.
Got it. So they're using it internally. Oh, that makes sense.
Well, they use it both internally and externally, but I was saying they have some external stuff, but then they also have some like super secret internal stuff.
Right. It's like that campaign they had for the new potato chip, right? They were looking for new flavors of potato chip. So they asked the public, but probably internally they're doing other things that they don't tell you about, taste testing and stuff like that.
So one of the biggest restaurant chains, who's no longer a client of ours, one of the biggest fast food restaurant chains in the world.
They were a client?
Sorry?
They were a client?
They were a client.
Okay.
They actually used us to crowdsource new menu items for their menu.
Okay.
So they went out and asked their millions or billions of customers around the world, what should be their new menu item? And then they did. They did it. They got thousands of ideas, and they actually did one of them, which is kind of cool.
Okay, so here's the question, right? From a business standpoint, I understand the concept, but why or what makes Ideascale, the platform itself, right? I know you didn't program it, but what makes that more appealing to a company like, I don't know, Coca-Cola, right? Coming out with a new cola versus them going on Facebook and running a huge campaign through Facebook, asking for input from the general public on what their next product should be, what their flavors should be, or whatever.
Sure. There's probably three things. Number one is security and control, right? Facebook is intended to be an open social network.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily have all the same security and protocols that a enterprise-grade piece of software does.
Okay.
So that's important for any large organization, whether you're a big bank, big government agency. You care a lot about privacy. If somebody's saying terrorist things on there, you need to be able to track down exactly who it is. There's a bunch of compliance things. That's really important, right?
Okay.
If you're dealing with big organizations, they care a lot about compliance, data security, stuff like that.
Even Coca-Cola, they don't want Pepsi to steal their flavor.
Exactly. Right. But it's not even stealing somebody stealing their stuff. You just need to know what's going on. Sometimes you need to restrict access. If I'm saying I only want my Japanese finance team to have access to this, you need to be 100% sure that those are the only 50 people that have got access to it.
Okay.
So that data didn't leak. There's all sorts of logging and technical stuff that needs to go on for data compliance reasons. That's number one. Number two is fit for purpose. Yes, you can go run a campaign on Facebook. You can also theoretically run a campaign on Google Sheets. Okay, you can run a Google Sheet that has people go on their ideas, but was that Google Sheet specifically designed for this task? No, right? Excel or Google Sheets can do pretty much everything you want. Okay, in life, you can build a full CRM in Excel if you want it. Why do people still pay for Salesforce?
Right. So they don't know what the hell they're doing.
So there's a benefit to having like fit for purpose software, right? You can use Excel to run a $100 million trucking company. It's probably a bad idea.
Yeah.
Or not probably, I definitely know it's a bad idea.
Right.
So it's fit for purpose software. And this is not, what I'm saying is not specific to us in our industry, but in general for any sub-industry, right? CRMs, finance software, you have fit for purpose software that does address the needs of that specific market. So our need, for example, or the need that we address is helping you collect ideas and evaluate ideas in a very effective way. Again, can you do portions of what we do in Excel or Facebook or TikTok? Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Right. But is it perfectly designed for this purpose? No. It's why you don't use a dumbbell to, do cardio training on your legs. You can, but running's just better for it. And then the third is kind of all the is the soft stuff around innovation. So our promise to you is we will help you become more innovative. And 90% of the way we do that is through our software, but about 10% is actually through the advisory side of our business, which we actually don't really charge for. But we say, and we believe what we say, is that we actually know a lot about how do organizations become innovative and how do they stay innovative.
Okay.
Right. So organizations come work with us because their end goal is not to pay for software or to collect ideas. They want to get better at whatever they're doing, whether it be delivering mail or making burgers.
Okay, so what are some of the answers to those questions? I think that's a common problem. Businesses want to be more innovative, or they think they're innovative and they're not. So what's some of the answers to that?
Sure. So there's three things that organizations need if they want to be innovative in a scalable way. Number one, they need a minimum. They need a minimum threshold of people who are actually creative and innovative, and that. You don't need 100% of your employee base, your customer base to be innovative, but you need roughly the numbers around 10%. Okay. The research shows. If you're like 5%, you're not.
That if you have 100 employees, you want like at least 10 of them to be
Exactly.
innovative
People who
thinkers.
want to be creative. Now
Right.
that's not sufficient. You need all three of what I'm about to say. So number one, you need that critical threshold of a certain number of your employees to be innovative.
Okay.
Number two, you need to actually give them incentives to innovate. Okay. And
Right.
companies really suck at, or not just companies, organizations suck at this, because in a lot of organizations, if you have a great idea, one of two things happens. Either no one cares or they steal your idea. And then conversely, innovation requires trying new things, and most new things fail, definitionally. Otherwise, somebody would have already done it. And when you fail at most organizations, you get demoted, you get fired, you get laughed at. So you, in fact, have a perverse incentive for not trying creative things.
Right.
So you actually, well-run organizations, and if they want to be innovative, they actually need to remove the disincentives and create more positive incentives for innovation. And number three is having the right resources. So a lot of organizations, they hire great people. They say, we'll give you a big bonus when you create that new product. And then they say, go sit in a dark room and go be creative. No, you want to give people the resource, whether that be budget, whether that be software, whether that be tools, to go actually practically apply that innovation or creativity.
Right. Well, that makes sense, right? You find the creative people, you nurture those people, and then you give them the tools to do it. I think Google's known for that, right? They want their people to like break something. They reward them for figuring out ways something doesn't work, right? I know organizations do that because it's going to get broken when it's out in the street anyway. I'm sure you guys had that your first release too. People would call you up and say, "Well, I don't understand. This doesn't work," because they're using it differently than you thought.
Of course,
use it, right? That
right.
happens.
Failure is like the cool thing about software in general, not just about us, is well-run software companies. They build something, but then they put it out, the term is into the wild, and customers interact with it in crazy ways, and they find bugs, or they just use it in a totally unexpected way, and companies have to reorganize. And actually, like a classic story of Airbnb, I don't know if you know this, they actually built, I forget what they originally built the company for, but people weren't actually buying what they built the company for, and they were like, but they're using it this strange way to basically run a hotel business. Let's go do that.
Yeah, no, I think originally was like a way for you to like travel or something, right? These guys needed places to stay, and they were like couch surfing, but now it's become a business for people. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the product itself. If I'm a small business owner, because I know you work with, we said, large organizations, your software is not cheap for the average business owner, but you said at a certain threshold, you give it away. You can use it for your organization. So let's, how can it benefit me maybe I'm a bad example, but a small company?
Sure. So our software, yes, our customers tend to be large organizations. Our software, however, our mission is to help innovation globally. And so we actually give our software away completely for free to either organizations of less than 100 people or teams of less than 100 people. So if you are a 50-person company or you're a 99-person team at like $1 billion organization like Samsung, our software is completely free. You can literally go to ideascale.com, click get started free. You're up and running in 2 minutes. And there's no strings attached. You can literally, we don't trap you in with our data, with keeping your data. You can literally, if you don't like us, you click export your data, delete your account, and you're gone. No Roach Motel model, which we're very proud of.
Right.
Because a lot of
there's federal legislation pending because some of these organizations are like trapped.
No, we do, like, yes, we don't do that because like we're any legitimate software company right nowadays, and it has basically said, look, we're going to build great software. We're going to build it so awesome that you want to stay, and if you don't believe us, delete your data, leave. Right?
Either you're good or you're not good. Not that you're trapped.
You can't run a successful business by trapping your customers in the business, right?
Right.
Eventually they stop, right? And the classic example is gym businesses. Like gym businesses make it really hard for you to cancel. Now there's federal legislation pending. Yep. But guess what? The hack people started doing, and I did this because my gym membership wanted me to send like a certified postcard down to Florida. I'm like, I live in New York. Why am I sending a certified? Right. I just canceled the credit card. It was really annoying, but I was just like, I would rather cancel this credit card
and go through the hassle.
Yes.
Yeah.
The credit card company, at least, I called them up. It took 2 minutes. I said, like, just cancel this card and give me a new one. I just don't want to deal with these guys.
Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. Go ahead. Finish.
Yeah. So to go back to your question, our software is completely free for organizations or teams less than 100 people, no strings attached. The way our software is useful is it, again, does the same three things that it does for large organizations, for small organizations. Collect ideas from your constituents. That could be your customers, your employees, people who love your business, whatever, people in your neighborhood. Number two, it helps you figure out which ideas are good and bad through the collective voice and votes of your customers. And number three, it helps you move those ideas from an idea to actual implementation. The kind of proof is in the pudding. We're small organizations. I've got 95 people spread across 8 countries or so.
Mm-hmm.
We use our own software, right? There's that joke of, never trust a chef who doesn't eat his own cooking.
That's true.
We eat our own cooking.
Okay. Yeah. You don't have to pay because you're only 95 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be weird accounting if I had to pay for my own software,
That would be an internal bookkeeping entry. That's pretty fun.
Yes, some net revenue stuff, which thankfully I have a finance team that deals with that. Again, scalability, so I don't have to think about it.
I'm interested in that. So the third piece about implementation, how does the software help you do that? I understand the whole thing about sending out your idea and getting feedback and collecting the data. Then what's the implementation like? How does that work?
Sure. So the basic idea is kind of 2 things. Number 1 is you can move things through a funnel, saying, hey, this is just an idea to this has been shortlisted. This is now, or you can move things through a funnel in terms of where they are in their life cycle. This is just a crazy idea. This has been vetted. This is now part of our roadmap. This is being implemented.
Okay.
Number 2 is at each of those stages, you can demand certain actions. Okay. So for example, at your first stage where you're just collecting all ideas saying, guys, just give me your ideas. I don't really care about whether they're good, bad, whatever. But when something goes to the second stage, you can say, look, Mitch submitted this cool idea, but is it financially a good idea? So you could have your finance team, at the second stage, there could be a requirement that the finance team has to say, hey, is it financially viable? Is it legal? Is it ethical? Whatever the questions that you would want subject matter experts to respond on. Okay. So you can have various pieces of either additional information or additional analyses happen at each stage. And the final stage, you can hand it off to a project manager who then says, hey, this was done, or I'm working on it. Those are the 2 major pieces. A third piece, which is not launched yet, but will be coming out in, I believe, early Q2, is we are actually implementing a full project management software as well. So once your idea goes through kind of the core Ideascale software and you're saying ready to implement, rather than using kind of our light project management approach, you can now hit send, shoot this idea over to a dedicated project management suite.
As opposed to having to use something else.
Yeah, exactly. We already have that integration, right? We don't believe in that Roach Motel model. So today you can take your data from Ideascale, and once it's hit that last piece, you can either use our pre-existent light project management software, or you can say, I'm going to send this to a Jira or Monday.com or Asana.
Yeah, whatever you use internally.
Exactly, whatever you use. Like, again, Good software companies don't trap your data. They say, we have an API. You want to send your data, at some point in the process to somewhere else, have at it.
Yeah, no, APIs change the world. I mean, being able to connect softwares and things like that, because
software needs to talk, right? Anybody who doesn't do that is building bad software.
Yeah, right. Because everybody uses different kinds of systems. They don't want to change everything they're doing. They like what you're doing, but then right now I'm in the process of changing a billing system. I used to do it manually. I don't do a lot of hourly billing. I went through like 4 or 5 different demos of software because it didn't do the things that I needed it to do. They're like, yeah, but we do this, this, and this. I don't have a team. I'm a solo attorney. I don't need that stuff. And I find that with a lot of law firm management softwares. It does too much for me, for my kind of practice. So I have different APIs.
Exactly. We think we're good at a lot of things, but if for some reason you don't like this piece of our software, go use something else for it, right?
Yeah,
it's okay.
Yeah, not a problem. Okay. What is up next for you guys? Like what's going on with the company?
Sure.
What's your next?
Q1's a huge quarter for us because we have 3 major feature releases coming out. Number 1, we have we are entirely rebuilding our reporting and analytics to make it much more modernized. That's just, happiness.
This is the user running reports for himself?
Yes, or herself. Exactly. So you have all this data. So like, how do you graph how many ideas you had, how many ideas moved from beginning to end? What was the ROI of those ideas? Like a large organization, they don't just care about how many ideas they have. And again, we have all this functionality, but we're upgrading it to a much easier drag and drop perspective. That'll make it so somebody who does not have a degree in mathematics can quickly figure out what is happening.
Easier user interface, basically.
Exactly. The second is our AI analytics tool. So one of the problems there's a whole bunch of simple data, right, that you can analyze. If you have a bunch of it's easy to count how many ideas you got or how much money you made off of them. That's easy. Numerical data is easy to analyze.
Yeah.
Idea data is not numerical though. It's qualitative. So if I ask you, how is Mitch's idea for a burger good? Well, that depends. The definition of good depends on, well, if you're a burger chain, the burger idea could be good. If you are an oil company, why the hell are you making recipes for burgers, right? So you need a lot of context to assess whether something is good or bad. And so what our AI tool does, amongst many other things, but the core thing it does is it automatically assesses whether ideas are good as well as implementable within the restrictions of your specific organizational context. Okay, so if you are running a one-person law firm, and that's part of your organizational description in Ideascale, and you are running a campaign for some strange reason, your law firm is running a burger campaign, it will assess that, hey, this burger idea could be good. But if that same law firm is running a campaign related to increasing billing, that same idea contextually is a terrible idea. And our cool AI tool will figure that out for you pretty well.
Now, is this stuff you built yourself, or you're using a back engine from, do you have your own internal AI development team?
So no, we're using two for the AI pieces. We're using two. We're using a mixture of ChatGPT as well as Llama. Almost all software organizations now are basically using the APIs for either Llama, OpenAI, Gemini, or Anthropic. It makes no sense to kind of rebuild your own AI. Training Llama, by the way, costs like $50 million each time. So why pay for that?
Yeah, so let them do it. It's like in the web development area. What's the WordPress? It's like the standard.
Yeah, I could rebuild WordPress if I wanted, right? Yeah. WordPress's code base is not that complex. It would just require me taking 100 engineers and sitting down for like 3 years to do it. Meanwhile, WordPress is continuing to build along. Right. Software, you should never rebuild software. This is actually something funny I run into. I'm going to get on my soapbox for a second. Everybody wants to build their exact version of software that works for their purposes. And yes, you can do it. But it is a terrible economic idea versus just paying a multi-tenant SaaS solution. Yes, they may only be 95% perfect for your application, but they have built a scalable, stable, bug-free piece of software, right? That's true for anything. I could build my own Excel if I wanted. Why bother?
Right. You're going to come out with new versions and you're going to update it and you're going to debug it.
Do I really want to maintain Microsoft Excel when Microsoft Excel has something that is, 98% as good as I could build myself? No, it's actually, it's probably more than 98%. It's 100% better than I could build myself. But it may not fit my exact use case and my exact hotkeys. But why rebuild it? That's a bad way to build software.
Right. Yeah, no, it's the same idea with Ideascale, right? You guys are good at what you do. And that's fine. And the people, you don't need to put all that, you don't need to start a separate AI company.
No, exactly. Again, I know the actual math to train Llama, I don't know how much you know about it. The code is entirely open source. So you can go to GitHub and download the entire code for Llama. And then if you wanted, you could go spend $50 million of GPU time and electricity training it yourself. The code, it's totally free. I mean, the actual code is totally free.
Is it similar to ChatGPT, or is it
Llama's all of the modern generated pre-trained transformers, whether it be Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, Llama, they're based on the same kind of intellectual framework.
Okay.
So what differs is really what they call how many parameters they have, basically how many dials and knobs there are, and then how much data it's trained on, I guess, and 3 for how long you trained it, whether you trained it for the equivalent of 1 million person years or 1 billion person years or 5 billion person years. But all of these models that we're talking about in AI, or I should say all the large language models, I have less expertise in the media models, by the way. I have no idea how the image models work. Yeah. But the large language models are all, again, whether you're talking OpenAI or Google Gemini, are basically trained on the same intellectual and mathematical framework.
Yeah, so the basics are the same.
Like 95% of the models are different. Now, that 5% does matter. That's why, OpenAI's model is better at doing mathematics than Gemini's models. The 5% does matter, but 95% is very much the same.
Interesting. All right. So, Nick, if people want to learn more about you, more about, your history, certainly Ideascale, what's the best way to connect with you? We'll put it in the show notes.
2 ways. The best way to connect with me, my personal website is nickjain.com. No funny spelling. You can see all the random projects I'm working on. The fun one that I built a few weeks ago is I built a Flappy Bird entirely from scratch and code. So if you want to kill a few hours of your life and play a highly addictive game, go do it.
Okay.
To get in touch with Ideascale, our website is ideascale.com. I highly encourage people to check it out. Again, our software is completely free for teams or organizations less than 100 people.
Sounds great. Nick, have a great weekend. Have a happy new year. And good luck. We'll keep an eye and see what's coming out I guess quarterly is what you guys look at.
Perfect. Well, we release things continuously over this quarter. A bunch of stuff is coming out like every 2 or 3 weeks. Then I haven't figured out my Q2 schedule yet. But thank you so much for having me on.
I appreciate it, Nick. Stick around.
Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Accidental Entrepreneur. Opening and closing music written and performed by Howie Moskovich and made to order music. For information about Howie and his music services, please follow the link in our show notes. If you like the podcast, please tell others about us. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and most of the other podcast directories. If you like what you hear, please leave us a 5-star review and feel free to share our episodes on social media. If you have any questions or comments, ideas for the show, or you'd even like to appear as a guest, reach out to us by email at info@beinhackerlaw.com.
The Accidental Entrepreneur is hosted by Mitch Beinhacker and produced by Beinhacker Law. If you'd like to learn more about our business and legal services, you can find us on social media or visit our website at beinhackerlaw.com. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe to our feed to be notified of all future episodes.